Hi, friends. Hello. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Craft Your Joy Live. I'm Lisa Hetrick. Happy New Year. It is freezing here where I am. I hope you're a little bit warm today. We're going to have some fun. Okay, friends. I see people popping in. Hi, Becky. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Judith. Hello. This is the first live tutorial of 2025. So we're just going to ease into the new year and we're going to make a really fun card today, but we're going to have some watercolor chat as well. Okay, friends, let's dive in. It's been a really interesting new year so far. So, okay, friends, hello, people popping in. Yes, it's freezing. Okay, so let me check. It's 23 here, 23 degrees here in Maryland. It's super windy, so it feels like -1 or something when I checked this morning. But, it is January and it is winter. So, hello, Catherine. Hello, Dawn. Everybody's popping in. Okay. All right, we're going to get started. Today, we're going to do a really fun card with my brand new stamp set with Gina K Designs that just came out on Tuesday called The Greatest Gift. And we're going to do a really easygoing watercolor resist technique. Super simple. I've done this technique before on this channel. Hi, Mary from Cold, Indiana. Everybody's popping in. But we are going to ease into our new year with a little bit of a watercolor chat. Today, I wanted to talk about permanent rose and the color permanent rose. Mainly because we're going to use pinks and reds in today's card. So I kind of wanted to talk about that. Oh my goodness. Catherine just said 18 degrees feels like 7. All right, let's go ahead to the down camera. Friends, if you have questions along the way, pop question in the chat and I'm going to answer them along the way. We're going to talk a little bit about like what I'm going to be doing with the YouTube channel this year, the content that I'm going to be sharing, and just kind of get your feedback too. Last year we focused quite a bit on different watercolor techniques. I'm going to continue to do that in the context of either painting or in our watercolor or paper crafting, but and we're just going to focus on a lot of other watercolory techniques. Okay, let's dive in. Here is the new set called The Greatest Gift and the coordinating die set. We are going to make this card today. I think when I shared this card on Tuesday, I think I felt like it was my favorite card. I know I said there was another card. It's over there that I said was kind of my favorite. But then when I went back and looked at this, I'm like, oh, I really love this one. And it gives me an opportunity to talk with you a little bit about watercolor resist with this big honkin' stamp in the new stamp set that has kind of like this brush watercolor effect to it. And there's a couple of different interesting things. This set isn't like a Valentine's set. It could be used for that if you'd like it to be, but it really is one of those sets to celebrate all year. Change up your colors, do different things. Got a lot of leafery in it, but super fun. Okay, so that's what we're going to do today. But first, let's have our little watercolor lesson, right? We're going to have our watercolor lesson. We're going to be using Gina K inks today, and we're going to be using some watercolor. All of the supplies are listed down below in the description, but I am going to walk through, so I'll talk about the supplies as I'm going through them. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about pinks. So I've got watercolor pinks and I have Gina K pink. Now, one of my favorite ink colors from Gina K is Passionate Pink. I use it all the time. I love this combination of color using Passionate Pink with the Cherry Red, and that's what we're going to do today. But I wanted to talk about the different kinds of pinks that you'll find in watercolor brands. Now, last year we talked a lot about different watercolor brands. It was one of the things that was requested of me the most was to not only share different kinds of watercolor techniques from beginner to advanced, but to share like the differences between brands from my perspective, like an observation. And one of the things that I found myself sharing along the way was that different brands call their colors the same color. It could be rose, could be red, could be whatever, that they call them different things, but the pigment is the same. And I kind of wanted to go through that a little bit today. Let's see if we can come in a little bit tighter. I wanted to go through that today with the color Permanent Rose. I've talked about Permanent Rose before and Winsor Newton's Permanent Rose, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it today. Now, Permanent Rose, I've just brought a couple different brands that I have in the Permanent Rose color. Something looks a little weird. I think I'm just in a little bit tight here. I've got some Winsor Newton. I've got some M. Graham, my Mary Blue, Da Vinci. Can you tell that I like Permanent Rose from Da Vinci? Look at this big tube. Daniel Smith, Core, and Mission Gold. So like I have all of these different watercolors. I just grabbed them from my stash, and they're all made from the same pigment, PV19. So I swatched them out here, and you can see that they're very close to each other in color, but they're called something different. So let's just go ahead and kind of dive in a little bit. Winsor Newton Permanent Rose. This is one of my favorites. I think my two favorites out of all of the Permanent Roses in my stash are Da Vinci and Winsor Newton. And I think and we're going to share a little bit about it. I'm going to use one of them today in the card. But the reason why I like them so much, and friends, I can feel myself starting to nerd out about the color. The reason why I like them so much is that they're very consistent in creating a wash. And you also get that really, really beautiful pink color that you're thinking of when you think of the color rose. So you've got a color that starts off with, this is like 100% milk. You've got a good wash of it, and then you can really get that color by adding water to go down to a really, really light pink. And we're going to do that. But let me just walk through this. And also, I would love it if you pop in the chat if this kind of information is useful. I feel like it's useful in understanding the watercolors you have, and also in making choices about watercolors. You don't necessarily have to stick with one brand unless that's what you really like. If you see colors across multiple brands, and I'm hoping that over time you can learn that from me, colors from multiple brands give you a little bit more variety in the palette that you're working with, and you start to build a palette of your favorites. So hello, Rhonda. Rhonda just popped in. Okay, so PV19, okay, is the pigment that is used in all of these colors, but you can see that the colors are a little bit different. They're pretty close to each other in their vibrancy, but they're called something different. So Winsor & Newton calls theirs PV19 Permanent Rose. Dawn says, always makes me want more. I know. M. Graham calls theirs Quinacridone Rose. My Mary Blue calls their PV19 Rose Lake. Da Vinci is Permanent Rose. Daniel Smith is Quinacridone Red, which kind of look at Daniel Smith. You can see that it doesn't even look like rose at all. They call theirs Quinacridone Red. Core, same thing with Core. Look at that. It looks, see how it starts pretty dark and it goes down to a really, really light color. Good morning, Cheryl. Quinacridone Red also for Core. I love that Core. So it kind of can really start like a reddish color and really come down to a super duper pink. And then Mission Gold calls theirs Quinacridone Permanent Rose. So a little bit of nerding out about colors. Now let's just go ahead, and I want to kind of paint out I've used permanent rose. Actually, I used permanent rose on the card sample. I think we're going to use a little bit of a different color today. I used that, and you can see like how you can get a nice darker value of that color, and how really, really pale you can get that pink. So again, one of the beautiful, beautiful things about watercolor is that you can take one color, this is permanent rose, and you can get a different range of values of that color. Look at that. I've got quite a bit of that pigment going there. A nice range of that color from a darker wash. Let me just keep going. All the way out to a lighter wash of that color. Look at that. Just that pigment is so strong and intense. I'm just going to add a little bit of water to the end here, just so we can just kind of see like how you can really change the value of that color just by adding water. So we've gone from that 100% like whole milk and graduating ourselves down by adding more color to it to get to that skim milk or almond milk like consistency where there's just a little bit of water, a lot of water, and a little bit of pigment. But I love that color, permanent rose. Love it. Okay, let me pull in like the Da Vinci and just kind of do the same thing and show you, since I said that these were my two favorites. So I would love it. Pop in the chat if this is a color. Ooh, I've got a lot on here. A color you're familiar with, or you can look at your stash of colors or your palette and you can see that there's a rose color in there. Look at that Da Vinci. Look at it go. Look at it go. Let me add some more water and just kind of go the rest of the way here. So very, very similar in the way that they look. PV19. Permanent rose. Love it. Gosh, I just love that color. Look, it's just so pretty. So, so pretty. Hello, Brenda. 9 degrees where Brenda is. Holy smokes. It's cold, friends. Look at that color. Just love that. Love, love, love that. Now, so all the different brands, I'm going to bring in Core. We've been talking about Core. We talked about Core a little bit. I kind of went off on a nerdy Core tangent in a couple of videos last year. Core is just super juicy. But look at that. It kind of comes out. It comes out of the gate. It's a lot more red. So Core's version of PV19 is called Quinacridone Red. But let's see what happens when we start to add more water to it and then changing the value of that color along the way. So you can get to that pink, but that undertone is a little bit more red in it. So kind of cool. Love that. I just love the idea that different brands have different versions of the same pigment, PV19. They have different versions of it basically by how they manufacture it. So how it's milled, what it's created with, if it's used, what the binder is that's used for it. Is it honey? Is it, I think it's acacia gum. There is gum arabic that's used. All the different binders that are used in the different brands can really change, and how finely milled that pigment is can really change the way the color is, the way the color performs. And each brand's a little bit different. So that's what kind of makes it really, really interesting. Now, all of these colors, oops, we got a little bit of a hair in here. Hair everywhere. All of these brands are considered artist grade colors. They are a little bit more higher end in their pricing structure. But I have shared on this channel before, the Cotman Winsor Newton Cotman Permanent Rose is very, very similar to the professional line. Da Vinci, like M. Graham, My Mary Blue, Da Vinci, Daniel Smith Core, Mission Gold, they all don't have like a lower version of them. So this is the color that you're going to get. But look at the vibrancy. All of them are super, super vibrant. And that's what you're going to get in a watercolor that's considered an artist grade. Not to say that your student grade colors aren't going to perform well. You're just going to need a little bit more pigment. Okay. All right. I think I've nerded out a lot about this color. I kind of just wanted to ease into 2025 a little bit. Talking about color. It's winter. Let's bring some really happy, joyful pinks into it. And pink is such a beautiful color that I use a lot in my florals. So I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit and nerd out a little bit. But if we take a look at these colors, look at how beautifully vibrant they are. Now, one more nerd out point and we're going to move on to the card. One of the things that's kind of important to note when you're getting started out in watercolor is sometimes you'll start and you don't feel like what you're painting is giving you the color payout, or sometimes people quit because they're not getting that boom, that in your face swash of color that you're getting here. And that has everything to do with the amount of paint you have on your amount of pigment you have on your brush, and how much how the quality of that watercolor. So you can tell that some watercolors will give you a lot more bang for the color right out of the gate. Winsor Newton will. Daniel Smith is well known for giving you a lot of bang for your color. M. Graham definitely. M. Graham is pretty like high end. I don't use it as much in my paper crafting projects as I do like in some other paintings. And for some reason, M. Graham is one of those fidgety brands for me, getting the color payout that I want to get. I feel the same way about My Mary Blue. Core, I've talked about Core, massive color payout. Mission Gold, another really great color brand with a great color payout and really affordable pricing too. Okay. All right, friends, totally nerded out. Let me know in the chat if you felt like this was helpful at all. I will be posting this color chart over in the Craft Your Joy Lab. So you can head on over to the craftyourjoylab.com. That is my new community and it's free to you. It's free to you. Okay, let's get started with the card. All right, I have some cardstock here. I have Moonlit Fog. I'm obsessed with this Gina K color. It is like a gray, like a grayish, right? It's like a gray with a little bit of green in it. But I really kind of love it for when you put pinks and reds up against it. It kind of changes. It's a chameleon color. Of cardstock. So I kind of love it for the contrast. So I'm going to be using that as my card base. And I've got this piece of cardstock that I already stamped. I pre-stamped it with some clear embossing powder. Pre-stamped it with embossing of watermark ink first, and then did embossing powder so that we can do our resist technique. And here is the stamp that I stamped down. And then we're going to kind of build up some color using our permanent rose. And then we're going to layer our stamped images on top. Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, now I think the color, I'm trying to decide which pink should I use. I tend to lean towards the Winsor Newton permanent rose, but I think I'm going to use Da Vinci today. I don't know. What about Daniel Smith? I'm not so sure which color I'm going to use. Let's use Daniel Smith. Let's go for Daniel Smith. Let's try it. All right, I've got a little bit of the quinacridone red here. I'm going to take which is PV19. I'm going to take a little bit of it and put it down here. Now, we're going to do a wet into wet technique. I'm going to, trying to get my lid back on here. A little wonky. Oh, Dawn says, love your explanations. Thank you. Just a little nerdy sometimes. Okay. Also, friends, I don't know. Raise your hand if you've been fighting a cold or a cough. I got a cough last week that like came on out of nowhere and then went to like this super deep cough. I'm on the mend. It came quickly and it's leaving as quickly. It's not sticking around, but it's leaving me a little sinusy. I always get my worst like allergy issues in the winter, and I think it's because of the dry heat and not having windows open, because I love having windows open. Now, if I'm in the house by myself on a cold day like this, I will crack a window, much to the dismay of the people who live with me. They don't love that because it's cold, but I like it. Okay, so I've got my image here, and you can see, let me just kind of turn it to the light a little bit so you can see that we've got that stamped image in that clear embossing powder. Now I'm just going to wet the entire layer. I cut this layer of cardstock. I used the Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor, favorite watercolor paper for my paper crafting projects. And I used the Master Layouts die to kind of cut this panel. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop in, let's get this quinacridone red nice and juicy, and I'm just going to start up here and just kind of drop in a few little droplets. One of the things about Daniel Smith is, you see, it doesn't whoosh. It's not a whoosh in the water kind of color brand. Like if I drop some core in here, core would go whoosh and like tentacle out. To a certain extent, Winsor and Newton will do that too. But I'm like recklessly painting that color all over this resist, and it's resisting. Dawn just asked, are you using the smooth side of the of the watercolor paper? Now, I'm using the textured side of the watercolor paper. Thank you, Dawn, for asking that question. I'm going to see if I can move in a little bit. Oh, looks like I got a little bit of another color there. Yeah, I knew that you meant smooth. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we've done this wet into wet. I kind of want to lift out some of this color, and see how I'm just cleaning my brush off and lifting away some of the pigment that's here, because I don't want it to be, I want there to be a variations in the lights and darks. And you can see here how the water is just kind of pilling up, and that's okay. Hello, Irma. That's okay. We're just going to let it pill up a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit of color around this edge of the resist. And I'm still working wet into wet. And now I'm just going to clean my brush and feather it out just a little bit. Okay. I'm going to add a little bit of color down here. We're still working wet into wet. And then I'm going to dry this up, and then we're going to go ahead and add some more layers. So look at that dramatic effect that we're already creating with this resist. The reason why I like doing these resist techniques with our stamps is that they're kind of messy and kind of forgiving all at the same time. We know that the water is resisting that embossing powder, and our watercolor just kind of wants to flow over top of it. I'm going to add a little bit right here. And the watercolor kind of just wants to find the crevices. We're just going to let this do its thing. Then I'm going to dry this. Excuse me. I'm going to dry this, and then we're going to come back in and add some more layers. Now, we've got a little bit of, see how the water is pilling up here? You can just kind of go around the resist and just dry it off if you want, or just leave it be and let it go in the crevices. I'm already loving the dramatic nature of this already. It's just kind of super fun, super quick and easy. And I would say that this technique gives you like that biggest bang of watercolor effects on your paper crafting projects, like instantly. You could also do this before I start to dry. Remember, you don't have to have the watercolor paint. If you don't have watercolor paint in your stash, don't rush out to buy it. You don't need it to do this technique. You can use your inks. You've seen me do this many, many times, and we'll do that. You put your inks down onto your surface, and you can use them as your watercolor medium. And Passionate Pink is an absolute beautiful, beautiful color for that permanent rose kind of look. Okay, let's dry this up. I'm going to flip this over. Just look at all those little puddles. First, let's clean up my puddle because I know I'll end up getting that all over something. So let's just go ahead and clean up my puddle. And then we're going to go ahead and dry this. And I'm kind of drying it a bit from a distance because I don't want to overcook the resist, the embossing powder. I have done that many times, friends. I'm a little bit embossing challenged, but this is my favorite technique for resist techniques. So I'm trying to be a little bit more careful. Cheryl just shared, I love how the color makes the stamp area look lacy-like. Exactly. And I'll talk about that. Oops. Let's kind of come in here. We also have a little bit of granulation going on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that and kind of share that and show that to you. Let's go ahead and dry that. Let's tidy up a little bit. I just got a quick little text. Loving that. Now, one little quick little, my daughter just texted, so let me just text her back because family first, friends, always. Sorry about that. Even on a live. Okay, one of the things about watercolor, look, we can still see this variation in contrast from lights to darks. Look at that resist, and you can see based on the stamp, like where the little bit of permanent rose is moving itself into the crevices, and we get that little bit of color. This adds a lot of texture to the card with absolutely no height, right? And it's super simple to do. You've seen me do it here, and it's just super fun. So, okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and add another layer of watercolor in. So we've got lights to darks, but as with any watercolor, once we've done this wet into wet technique, it's super, super vibrant, right? Wet, and then it dries, and then it fades back. And then sometimes that feels like, oh, what happened, right? Why is this not working? Well, that's what watercolor does. Watercolor will fade back a couple shades, right? So you can add more color back in, and that technique is called glazing or layering. I just call it layering. It makes it super easy. I could wet this whole area again and add more color, but we're going to do wet into dry. Brush is wet, paper's dry. I'm going to pick up some of this color, and I'm just going to add a little bit more to these areas. And you see I'm just kind of dancing my brush around and just kind of going around like this. And that hard line, I'm going to clean off my brush, and I just have water on my brush and just kind of feather that out a little bit. Feather it out just by going back and forth with my brush. And then I can just kind of pull away, clean brush, pull away, just kind of bouncing my brush around this area, getting a little bit more of that color into the crevice. Love it. Drop a little bit right here, right? Clean off my brush. And all I'm doing here is glazing, adding another layer, just kind of feathering it out with some clean water. And we can already see that that color is getting more vibrant. More vibrant. Okay. All right, I'm going to add a little bit here. All right, add a little bit more here, and see, we've got a little bit of a hard line right here. I'm just going to feather that out, cleaning off my brush in between, dapping it off, and just feathering it out. And I'm dancing my brush around. Ah, look at it. It's so, I'm loving it. Now let's go ahead and dry it, and you'll see that that color will fade back even more. So we're using, where's my sample? Where's my project? Here we go. Oh, my sample card. So here is the Winsor & Newton Permanent Rose. You can see I only did probably 2 layers there. Very, very light pale washes. Using that quinacridone red, which is PV19 Permanent Rose in the Daniel Smith, you can see that we've got a pretty big payout of color. So let's go ahead and just dry this up. Being careful not to overcook so I'm moving that around a little bit. Now look at the area. To come back to what Cheryl said about that lacy-like look, we're coming back to the stamp, and you can see that more color is moved into the crevices of the distressed parts of that brush stroke, and it's adding a little bit more color. It's making that resist kind of pop a little bit more, and I love it. Okay, Dawn just had a quick question. Let's answer this question. I use the Strathmore paper, but find it warps. Oh, it does warp. Yes, it totally warps. See? So I use this for paper crafting projects, but let's get to the second part of your question. My resolution is to place inside a heavy book. Oh, marking the page, of course. Is that a good idea? No. So Dawn's question was about the Strathmore Ready Cut watercolor and how it does warp. Now, it does. And a lot of watercolors, any watercolor paper that you're working with, whether it's low end or high end, is going to warp unless it's on a block. The block is where it's glued around all 4 sides. It will warp because we're throwing a lot of water at it, and it's going into the fiber of the paper, and the pigment is moving, and it's going to create that wavy look. Now, here is a super easy trick. You can, A, pop it inside a book. Don't forget that what book you put it in, and put it on the shelf, because I've done that. B, you can also run it through your die cutter. Just flip it over, put it between like 2 pieces of paper, run it through your die cutter and flatten it out. Or C, oops, I've got a little thing that just popped up on my screen. Let's close that. C, you can take and flip it over, put a paper towel, like a wet paper towel or a wet washcloth. I like to use flour sack towel because it's thinner, and then you can iron it. You can iron the back of your paper, and it will flatten it out. It will totally flatten it out. Okay, so we've gotten some more color here. I'm loving this. I really think I want to add just a little bit more. So we're into our layer 3. Dawn, I hope that answered your question. And everyone, I hope that was helpful. And maybe next time what I'll do is bring in an iron and just kind of show you that. I'm going to take a little bit more of this color, wet into dry. Paper is dry, brush is wet, got a lot of pigment. Just going to come around and dance my brush a little bit on here and just kind of add a little bit more. You're welcome, Dawn. Now, clean brush, feather this out. Clean, but not super sopping wet, just kind of wet. Wet enough for me to feather out what I've got here, feather that line out, but still preserving the depth of that color. I feel like down here, I also feel like some nerdy stuff is coming out. I'm noticing things and I'm just kind of nerding out. I feel like there was a little bit of a harsh line down here, so I'm just gonna add a little bit more. Feather this out. Okay. Feather that out a little bit. Digging that, and I want to add just a little bit more up here. And all I'm doing is just judging by my eye where I want to add a little bit more color. I'm also kind of creating this look of contrast between darks and lights, but kind of focusing it in this direction. You can see. For what reason? For the reason that I like it. No real scientific reason other than I think that that is really appealing to the eye in this card. Okay, let's go ahead and dry this up, and then we're going to move on. Just dry it up a little bit, and then I'm going to set it aside and let it dry a little bit too. Okay, let's set it over there. Let's go ahead and clean up. We're going to do a little bit of stamping, and before we do that, I want to take one of the lighter colors or one of the darker colors. I'm thinking about this. Let's take a little bit, no, let's take that red. I'm going to take that quinacridone red because it's already down here. And I'm going to do a really intense wash of this color. So this wash is more like a whole milk wash of color. You can see a lot of pigment on the brush, and I'm just kind of doing a back and forth nice little wash of color because we're going to use this and die cut a heart out of it after it dries. So let's go ahead and set this aside, let that dry too, and I'm going to bring in some the lightweight cardstock. And let's go ahead and, oh, you know what I just noticed? I don't have a green. I don't have a green. I need to grab fresh asparagus. Hold on. Okay. Where are you, fresh asparagus? Here you are. Oops. I noticed that I wanted to do some leafery, but I had only pulled pinks out here on my desk, and I need fresh asparagus. So we're going to go ahead and do some leafery, and I think I want to do this leafery piece. We're going to do some die cutting. Let's do, in the stamp set, I did this piece of leafery going in 2 different directions. So let's go ahead. We're going to do that. We're going to use those 2 pieces of leafery. We are also going to be using the ribbon, and I'm going to use the little flower element and the heart element. So let's go ahead. Let's find a spot to put the stamp set. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to stamp everything up, and then we're going to die cut them. And yep, I'm going to bring that little cute little die cutter into the screen while we do the die cutting. So I'm going to use Passionate Pink because using this with the pink that we use, the pink watercolor, is a really nice contrast. You could also stamp this in the cherry red, but I really want to bring in some of the pinks. So I'm just going to go ahead and stamp that down. Go ahead and clean that off, and then grab the little heart. Now, I created these 3 little hearts in the stamp set because you can take them. They're super cute. We can always use hearts, right? But the heart fits right inside of the flower. How cute is that? We could do that in red. I'm going to go ahead and do it in pink and just kind of stamp that right in there. And see how it fits right in the center? That's so, so cute. You could also I'm going to do it right now. You could also use those cute little hearts and kind of stamp them next to each other like this to kind of create that a clover inside of there, or just to create another little interesting center of the flower. How fun is that? Love it. Okay. All right, friends, I've got to take a quick little drink because my throat is that crazy cough out of nowhere. Okay, we are going to die cut this piece. Now, I am going to go ahead and stamp out our, oh, I desperately need to clean my blocks. I'm going to stamp out our leafery. So I hope you got a chance to catch the release party on Tuesday. It was super fun. It was a big one. It was a really, really big release party. I was super excited to share my stamp set in my release video. So I do have a walkthrough video of this stamp set. If you're interested, you can see it on my channel. I did, in that video, I was struggling not to cough. There was a couple things I had to edit out because I was coughing in the video. So it was just kind of like, yikes. All right, we've got the 2 pieces of leafery. We've got our flower element. I want to bring in another piece of the Gina K lightweight cardstock. And I want to stamp, I'm going to stamp out this cute little bow. Now this bow also has that little heart in the center. We're going to go ahead and stamp that out in cherry red. And then we're going to die cut all of our pieces. And by the time we're done die cutting, I think everything should be dried up pretty well, but we'll see. Let's go ahead and stamp that down right there. Go ahead and clean off everything. I'm cleaning as I go, which I never do, so super fun. All right, let's go ahead and get the dies. Couple things I want to do with talk about with the dies. So we've got the leafery dies. I've got the big honkin' die piece that cuts here. In the hearts, I have the die that cuts the biggest heart that you can, that's in the stamp set. I didn't have a die for the other 2 because when we have little tiny dies in our set, sometimes we lose them, and that's frustrating. And then this die, let's pull the heart die out. This die is super fun because it cuts out the outer shape and the inner shape, which I think is super fun. A little something different. Let's go ahead and pull all this out, and I'm going to bring in this stinking cute Intri-Cut mini. I'm obsessed with this little guy, this little girl. Got to give her a name because she fits onto the screen, and she's just a lot of fun to do these super simple things. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just die cut this. Now, while I'm die cutting and just kind of getting everything prepared for die cutting, I'd love to hear from you about what kind of things you would like to learn from me this year on the channel. Last year, I really did focus a lot of the tutorials around techniques that were watercolor related. We didn't focus as much on the anatomy of building a card. We would make a project or we would do a paint along. We didn't focus as much on the anatomy of building a card as we did on the techniques. I'd love to know if that's something that still appeals to you. I feel like there are so many card makers on YouTube that are phenomenal, that focus a lot of attention on the anatomy of a card and the techniques related to it, and experimenting with techniques like that, where I can bring more value to what you're learning is sharing more of these kinds of techniques. in the context of making a card, where we kind of have a little bit of a lesson in the middle, and I can focus it on watercolor or really focus it on things that you might have been curious about related to watercolor or other artful mediums that help you create watercolor effects. So, Cheryl just says, I love that heart. I can't wait until the stamp set arrives. I cannot wait to see what you create. I cannot wait. This was such a fun stamp set. I feel like I didn't stamp that very well. Let's go ahead and stamp it again. So I would love to know if you would like to continue with that. We were focusing on brands. We were focusing on watercolor techniques. Let's just go ahead and stamp this again. Dawn just shared, I wish the die cuts did not leave a white edge. I'm going to address that because that's such a great question. As you all know, as many of you know, I'm a product designer too. So I design, not only do I do illustrations for my Gina K line, I design all of the products for the classes and things for scrapbook and cards today. So I'm intimately familiar with die design and the leaving of the white edge. So one of the issues with die design is making sure that you, as a designer, you're working with manufacturers, and you're also focused. When you look at the die, I'm going to show you here, you can see that to properly line it up with your stamped image, which can be challenging sometimes, you've got a little bit of a millimeters that you're working with. Now, I've created dies that cut really, really, really close. And unfortunately, sometimes that creates a big margin of error for stampers. Like they can't get it lined up and they can't get it the way that they want it. They can't cut it the way that they want it, or it keeps cutting into their stamped image, because you can see like this one is kind of cutting it close, right? If I didn't line this stamp up very well, I would easily cut into the stamped image. So that happens. So as a designer, when you're doing these things, you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about like, what's the margin of error going to be for the person who's making those cuts, and what is the level of frustration that's going to be created based on what you designed. So there is kind of a I'm looking for my scissors here. There is kind of a school of thought when we're creating those outer edges. So let me back up because I heard some things pop in. Dawn, I hope that answered your question, but I am going to give you a solution. Cheryl just said, I would like to learn more on how to create images with watercolor, something like flower arrangements and easy butterflies. Cheryl, I have two ideas that I want to do with that. I'm going to go into deeper dives with that with our paint and chat, where we're literally doing a little bit of painting and you're kind of creating. You don't need any illustration experience whatsoever to create a composition like that. And I'm also going to do that with stamps. One of the big things I wanted to focus on this year was, hey, let's look at their stamp stash and how can I pull a bunch of different images, mash them up, and create a composition like that, right? Like a vase with some flowers and a butterfly, and it creates an entire composition, and then we can walk through the techniques of painting that. So that's an idea. Rhonda said, yes, please. I love learning more about watercolor. Catherine just shared, I'd like to know more about adding fine detail with a smaller brush and different watercolor. Not sure if that's glazing or not. Yes, it is glazing, and it is kind of going into some deeper techniques that I cannot wait to do. I love this. Cheryl just said, oh, I forgot. I would also like to learn more about using different brushes. The fan brush, the angle brush. The other brush that's really super fun is called the cat's tongue brush. That's great, Cheryl. Such a great tip for me. Thank you. I would love to nerd out about brushes. Love to nerd out about brushes. Now, Dawn, I'm going to double back to that that little bit of white line that is around the edges. So some dies can cut a lot closer. You can see that my stamp was a little wonky and kind of pushed over a little bit, so I ended up with a little bit more white around it, and that's user error. So as a designer, we're thinking about those things. At least I'm thinking about those things when I'm creating, especially when I get a request from someone that I'm working with that says, "Hey, can we make that die as close to the edge as possible?" Well, we can, but we have to be ready to answer to the fact that some people will be frustrated, right? So that's just something that I grapple with when I'm designing stuff. And you can see in the die, you can see this is the piece that cuts. This is our outer edge, right? So when it cuts, when that die cuts, it also puts an indentation in the paper. So it kind of folds the paper just a little bit. So when you're designing, you're thinking about that too. Like, oh my gosh, if it folds too much, it could fold into my line. So here's how we resolve it. Like, I've got a little bit too much white. You can see that my stamped image was kind of popped up there a little bit. And you can see, I think you can see where that die cuts, and there's a little bit of the folding of that paper right there. So if I get a little bit too much white, like I have right here, I just will kind of go in and I'll trim just a little bit more and kind of trim around the edge and trim it out. But I hope that answered your question. I totally felt a nerd out moment between designing dies and your outcome, and like what the thought process is that goes through my head when I'm designing dies. So, oh my goodness. Catherine just had something happen with her puppies. Oh my goodness. Cheryl just shared, I'll be waiting for those classes. Yes. Yes. Okay. Let's move on to one more die cut piece. Okay. Remember this piece right here that I cut? This is that quinacridone red. It's got that permanent rosy light color to it, but it's skewing a little bit more red. Now I'm going to take this die and I'm going to cut it out. This is one of my favorite things to do. Oops. Did you see that? I just tried to pop that in there without any plates. Crazy. Crazy. Okay. Let's pop this in here. We're just going to cut this out. I'm going to talk a little bit about this die. So this die is super fun. This die cuts out. I love it when we can create dies that have multi-purposes to them with your stamp set. So not only does this die, not only does this die cut out, it cuts a really nice shape, right? It also pops out. Let me pop this out. It can be used to cut that. It can be used to cut the center out of that stamp. It could also be used with your favorite pattern paper or a piece of watercolor paper. And you can just cut a fun little heart as a die cut. So I love that. I love getting that 2-for-1 kind of thing going. All right, let me bring in my Moonlit Fog. We're going to kind of just pull this all together a little bit and see if my color choices were good ones. I've got my Connect glue, friends. Finally got my Connect glue back. I also finally declogged. Had some Connect glue that was clogged. Finally got that unclogged. I like using the Connect glue. I like using a liquid glue with watercolor paper because, again, that warping happens with watercolor paper. And it really does help me, gives me a moment to get it in position and to kind of get it down onto the paper. Okay, let me just see if I had another question. Oh, Catherine, that's so sweet. Catherine said, I wish more people watched your videos. How can you promote on the GKD chat without using inks for watercolor effects. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. So I use, like I will share this video. Oh, did I get that straight? Nope, I didn't. I will share this video in our Gina K, in the Gina K group. And I'm using a little bit of everything. So I am pretty careful about that. I try to focus on watercolor techniques, using our inks and using my stamps. So I will share this video over there, but I won't share, I won't like over promote like anything else. And this is my like line of stamps, so I am sharing all the different things that you can do with this stamp in hopes that it gives you lots of inspiration. Cheryl just says using a small decal die with that heart cutout panel. Ah, yes, you could. Cheryl just shared another really great idea. I love this. Okay, so you see how we have that well-defined heart. Now, what I found when I started to layer my die cuts over that well-defined heart is that I started to lose my shape a little bit. You kind of know that the heart's there, but you kind of can't see it, right? So let's see. I thought maybe this, putting this heart over top, would help me. Let's just put a little bit of glue. And as far as like more people watching my videos, I actually don't pay a lot of attention to how many people watch my videos. I know that people do, and I know that this YouTube channel is growing, but I'm very, very comfortable with things taking their time and growing at a pace that is valuable. My number one important thing is that I come to you when I'm doing these lives and bring you value and bring you a lot of good teaching moments. That's kind of always my number one thing. And Cheryl, you're right. Gina always mentions my tutorials and learning more about watercolor techniques. And that's why in my tutorials, I like to share, like, you don't need your paint to do this technique. You don't need to go out and buy that to do this technique. You can use your inks or whatever ink brand that you have in your stash to do these techniques. That's why, like, it's really, I'm having a nerd out moment. It's really important to me on this channel and in this, in the techniques that I share with you, to focus on techniques so that you can master some of these skills using the supplies that you have to create the watercolor effects. So I'm always looking at different art mediums, whether it be paint, ink, pencils, pens, markers, all these different things that can help you achieve these watercolor or watercolor-esque effects, right? So that's kind of like my approach to it. So when I'm coming to you on this channel, I'm also focusing on what kind of teaching moment can happen here, what kind of value can I bring in that way. So I hope that comes across. Catherine said, I meant using your images and dies. I love them. I think people are afraid. Oh, Catherine, you're so right. So Catherine just shared, I think people are afraid of watercolor but are more comfortable with inks. You're right. We know you use the inks, but I don't think most folks do. That's a really good point. That's a really good point, Catherine. So maybe some of the upcoming tutorials will do a little bit of both, right? We'll use inks, show you what it looks like in ink, show you what it looks like in watercolor, so you can kind of understand the differences of effects. Bye, Cheryl. Have a great coffee date with your friend. Catherine, let me know if you think that would be helpful. I do think that people are a little bit intimidated by watercolor. Here is my flower. I'm going to lay this down a little bit lower than I did in the original. And we're going to have I think I'm going to nest the leafery so that it kind of comes up around the bottom. So it isn't laying on top of it, but then we don't lose that look of the heart. Connie said, definitely new techniques. Can you watercolor on stencils? Yes, you can. And Catherine, to your point about people being a little bit intimidated by watercolor, and there has been this massive surge of people really wanting to use stencils to color their images. I know because I've even designed stencils to color in stamped images, because it is a little bit of a lower, what I call like a lower barrier to entry, right? If you can get those watercolor techniques, or you can get a lot of color bang with a stencil. I need to trim this just a smidge to kind of fit that under there. Catherine, thank you. And when you post on the chat, be sure to mention that you're going to use the inks and show how, yes, how to achieve those results. That's great. I do have like several tutorials on this channel, but I feel like you're right, Catherine. It is something that can be reiterated often, like how to use your watercolor, how to use your inks as a watercolor medium. And it is something as a good reminder, because people don't always go back and look at old tutorials. They might look at the description or the headline. They don't always go back. They're always looking like what's next. So it is kind of, even though in my head I might feel like I'm repeating myself a lot, sometimes people are just hearing it for the first time. So that's why I kind of go over techniques multiple times in different ways, using different products to kind of create that effect. So, all right, I'm loving the way this looks. Loving it. Kind of not sure if I'm gonna love that. I'm not sure if I'm going to love this little die cut ribbon, and the reason why is because of the white. Exactly, it's the headline. That, yes, Catherine, thank you. So I'm not sure I'm gonna love. I'm not sure I like that white. I'd love to hear what you all think. I'm actually tempted, friends. I'm really, really tempted to take our die. We're running over a little bit, but so be it. If you have to go, I totally get it. I'm thinking about taking that die, if I can figure out where I put it. And here it is. And cutting it out. I don't love this white. How about just the bow without the hanger? Oh, that's a good call. Catherine! Catherine has so many great ideas today. All right, let me just show that. And this kind of gets back to what Dawn was saying about the reason why I don't like it is because of the white that's coming around it. So it was giving me pause enough to think about, yep, Dawn said that's what I meant. Giving me pause enough to think about cutting this out in a piece of watercolor paper that I've already painted. But let's go ahead in. I'm going to go in and I'm going to just kind of trim out the hanger a little bit and see how I feel about that. Which is cute. Which is really cute, which I kind of like. But I'm kind of going to take it to another step and explore a little bit. So see my passionate pink here? Let's die cut this passionate pink out. See if I like that. Yep, Catherine just said, or cut the whole thing out in red. That's what I'm thinking about doing. I'm going to do it in this passionate pink and see if that passionate pink up against that quinacridone red will give us a little bit of the contrast that we're looking for. Okay. All right. Let's just go ahead and do this. Woo! Let's just go ahead and cut that out. Let's see what that looks like. I love when we can experiment together and we can have like this interactive conversation, and you're kind of helping me design it along the way. Because you have, like, I always have an idea of what I think things are going to look like in my head. Look at that. Now, I'm going to probably love that bow even more. And we're going to take it another step further. Let's pull in the little tiny heart. See that little heart with a little bit of the cherry red? I can stamp that heart right in the center there of that die. So again, with that twofer die, you got the die that cuts out the stamp, which is brilliant. And now we have the die that we can just use to cut that shape out. And I'm just going to stamp that little tiny heart in there. Didn't stamp it that well. Let's see if I can stamp it again. I kind of stamped it off the edge, but it got a little bit darker. Okay, so I'm kind of liking that. Let's see if we like the way it looks on the card. Let's bring that in. Catherine said, you're so gracious about your ideas. Okay, I don't love that either. I don't love that, and I think it's because it's in the color that it's in. But that's all right. Let's come back to this. And I don't think I love that either. All right, so here's why I think I loved it over here. And here's why I'm going to completely ditch it over here and not use it. Here's why I loved it over here. The white around here didn't bother me as much. I didn't accentuate this heart in this design like I did here with the outer die cut. There's so much of a level of contrast here between our white resist area, our color inside here, and then this heart, and then the die cuts here. Versus here, there was some die cuts here, and they're laying on top of the heart. This is laying on top of the heart. We've got white, white, white. Everything just feels different in this card. This card, I don't like it, and I'm not going to use it. So we're just going to leave it. Boom! We're just going to leave it. We're going to leave it out. Yes, Dawn said you can make a bow with silver or gold thread. You could totally make a bow with silver or gold thread there. And that would be beautiful too. But I think for today, we're just going to leave it out. We're just going to leave it out. But if you did, like, see, if you did made a little bow with thread, that would be beautiful. Judith just shared, I like it better without the bow. Me too. Let's go ahead and put in our sentiment. Now, we have some options here because my sentiment, my heart is with you, fits inside that heart. Or it can go down here. I think because we didn't do the bow, I'm going to do the sentiment inside the heart. And then we're going to add some white. Let's see. Let me grab my amalgam. I love this. I love that we designed this together. Or all white with no stamp, just the die. Yes. Good point. Like if we did this in white and we did that in white, that would be nice. Love that. So it's kind of interesting, the choices that I've made along the way. In my brain, I kind of had a thought of how it might look. I'm going to open this up. Just kind of put that right there. And take the My Heart Is With You with amalgam. Now, if you want, you could use your Misty. I'm going to go rogue. I think I'm going to get enough color on here that I can just go rogue and stamp this once. And get it in there pretty solid. And I did. I don't always, right? Kind of digging that, the way that looks. The My Heart Is With You. I love it. I love the way this is turning out now. You can see that sentiment. Oh, I love that. You can see the sentiment that it's laying over that darker color. It's kind of giving you a little bit of a different look to the black. All right, I've got some of this Nuvo Drops Simply White. I'm just going to go ahead and use some of this. Instead of doing a splatter with like the P.H. Martins, I'm going to do just some cute little dots with this. I like these little applicators because it allows me a little bit of control. Gloria just shared, shows that there's lots of ways to use the set. Yes, I feel like there's lots of ways. I feel like sometimes we kind of get stuck in our ideas, and until you're kind of faced with something you don't like, I don't like that. So let's take that out with my finger. Until you're faced with something you don't like and you just kind of want to change it, then that's when the experimentation starts. Putting a little bit up there, just kind of creating a little trail down here. Notice how we focused all of our color kind of going in that direction, but now I'm just kind of focusing a little bit of that white going in this direction, up and breaking the shape of the card. And before I add too much, I'm just going to leave it be and let it go and let the card be this. I'm kind of digging that. Wait a minute, one more thing. One more thing, a little tiny dot. Just want to put a little one right there. That caught my eye right away, so I wanted to fix it. Okay, friends. I kind of like the way this looks. Took a total different direction than I thought it would. This is kind of where, this was the inspiration of where I was originally kind of heading with it. But hey, I already created this card, right? Why not use a card that you've created and be like, what else can I do, or how else can I experiment? And really what took me in a different direction was the color choices that I made and going with that darker rose color. Neat. Love it. I love the way this card turned out. I'm digging it. We got 2025 started off pretty good. Yes. Yes. Okay. I see a couple questions. Okay. Connie just asked, can you watercolor with stencils? Yes. And someone else just asked that question too. Back here. But yes. Yeah, you can. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit more challenging, but there are ways to do it. So I think that's going to be a topic for another video, since stencils seem to be really interesting to people. So, and I have used them on the channel, and I have done some watercolor techniques with them. So let's do it again, and let's take another deeper dive into it, Connie, so that you can learn more about it. And I'm designing some stencils right now along with some other of my Gina K stamps. So maybe there might be some stencils that into the future that coordinate with my stamps, future stamps. Neat. Okay. All right, friends, we have run over a little bit. We have run over quite a bit, but I hope you got a lot of value out of today's tutorial. I really enjoyed the interactivity that we had with each other today, and you helping me design it, especially when it kind of derailed a little bit and went in a direction that I wasn't expecting. I love that. I hope you got I hope we had a lot of fun. This was the first tutorial of 2025. And I think we're off to a really, really good start. I will be back next Thursday with a brand new tutorial. Stamp set mashup, watercolor, you know. I'm thinking maybe we'll bring our stencils into the mix next week and talk about watercoloring with our stencils, watercolor techniques with our stencils. So think about our blending brushes and how we can kind of create some of those techniques. Okay, friends, I'm sending you into the weekend to craft your joy. Remember, all of the supplies are listed down below in the description. I also have some other things in the description for you. If you're interested in joining my email list, that link is there. I'd love to see you over in my free community at craftyourjoylab.com. That's down below in the description. This community is vibrant and growing. There's a lot of people over there already. I'm really excited. And I've got some really interesting things that are only happening in that community. I'm not sharing it in social media or here on YouTube. I'm serving up a couple different things over there on that platform. Okay. Everyone's saying thank you and beautiful card. I'm just so grateful that you could all join me today. It has been really great to see everybody and really great to get started. So again, I will see you next week. And if you're on my email list, that will be coming out to you in the email. You'll also see that information over in the community. Okay, friends, thanks so much for joining me. I will see you next week, and have a great day.